When we think about protecting a company, we often jump to things like passwords, maybe firewalls.
Right, the tech stuff.
Exactly. But what about the deeper things, the invisible structures inside an organization that really protect its integrity?
That's a great question, because those internal factors, they're often where the real vulnerabilities lie.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at fraud prevention, specifically through the lens of a really comprehensive employee assessment. Our source material here is it's an assessment tool. It comes from Module 1 Employee Assessment, and it's structured with these sort of simple-sounding, yes, not applicable questions.
Simple on the surface, maybe, but their purpose is critical.
Which is?
Essentially, to assess the probability, the likelihood that a fraudulent event could actually happen within that specific company. It's like a diagnostic checkup for fraud risk.
Okay, a diagnostic.
Yeah.
And just for context for everyone listening, we should mention this script was prepared by Yazan Abu-Ghosh, who's a certified fraud examiner, working with EasyPathUni.
Yeah, and the original template comes from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, ACFE. We've reviewed it, of course. It gives you a sense of the rigor behind it all.
Definitely. So it's not just a random checklist someone threw together.
Not at all. And what's really insightful is how it drills down into 3 specific areas.
Okay, what are they?
First, the actual internal controls the company has. The specific rules and procedures.
Makes sense.
Second, the overall internal control environment. So the culture, the tone at the top, that kind of thing.
Right, the broader context.
And third, crucially, the resources the organization actually has available. Do they have what they need to prevent fraud or detect it, or even just deter people from trying?
Got it. Controls, environment, resources. It's a holistic view.
Exactly.
So our mission today for you listening is to pull out those key insights, those nuggets of knowledge hidden in this assessment. We want to understand how you build a really strong anti-fraud framework.
And why these questions, even the ones that seem basic, carry so much weight.
Okay, let's unpack this. So here's where it gets really interesting. Right off the bat. It seems like preventing something like fraud, it just always starts with the absolute basics.
It really does. Clear structures, documented policies. It sounds mundane, maybe?
A little bit, yeah.
But essential.
Absolutely essential. It's a blueprint. Look at question 1 in the assessment. Are employees provided formal written job descriptions?
Okay, standard HR stuff.
Well, yes and no. It's not just about what the employee is supposed to do. The real power here, from a fraud perspective, is defining what they are not responsible for.
Ah, I see. So if they step outside that.
It's an immediate flag. Where it should be, it creates a clear boundary, prevents that scope creep that can sometimes mask shady activities.
That makes sense. Clarity as a barrier, which seems to link to question 2. Are employees provided with an organizational chart? Again, it sounds basic, but how does an org chart actually help stop fraud?
Think of it as a visual map of responsibility and authority. It shows who reports to whom, the division of work. Fraud often thrives in confusion in those blurry lines. So the chart clarifies things.
Precisely. It makes it harder for someone to operate outside their lane or for duties to improperly overlap without it being obvious. It provides transparency.
Okay. And building on that documentation theme, question 3 asks about written accounting policies and procedures. Why the emphasis on written and communicated?
Because unwritten rules are easily bent or forgotten. Having clear written policies, especially ones that specifically address fraud, and ensuring everyone knows about them, that's critical. It removes ambiguity.
It means I didn't know isn't an excuse.
Exactly. And that leads right into question 4 about a formal policy for approval authority. For spending money, like purchases or travel.
Yeah, that seems like a direct control over assets.
It is. It's a gatekeeper function. Who can initiate a transaction? Who needs to authorize it? How is it recorded? Reviewed? Defining this clearly is fundamental to safeguarding assets and ensuring reliable financial reporting. Without it, it's too easy for unauthorized spending or transactions to slip through.
We hear a lot about tone at the top in business ethics. Questions 5 and 6 get right into that ethics statements and whether senior management actually behaves ethically. Are these just, nice words on paper?
They can be, unfortunately, but they shouldn't be. An ethics statement needs teeth. It should define unethical conduct, state the consequences, and tell people how to report issues.
But the key is management living it, right? Question 6.
Absolutely paramount. If senior leaders don't consistently model ethical behavior, if they don't visibly show zero tolerance for fraud, then all those written policies are just wallpaper. The behavior at the top dictates the real culture. That consistency is everything.
So walk the talk isn't just a cliche here.
Not at all. It's fundamental. And this idea is reinforced by questions 7 and 8 having written fraud policies specifically and assigning responsibility for compliance to a senior manager.
So not just general ethics, but specific fraud policies, and someone senior owns it.
Right. It ensures accountability. It signals that fraud prevention isn't just an HR or audit issue. It's a core business priority championed at the highest level.
Okay, so we've got structure, policies, tone at the top. Now let's talk about a really core mechanism. Segregation of duties. Questions 16 and 44 hit this hard.
Yes. Are the duties related to authorization, custody of assets, and recording or reporting of transactions segregated? And importantly, has the proper segregation of duties been performed?
What's the underlying idea that makes this so critical?
It's simple, really. It makes it much harder for one person to commit and conceal fraud on their own. If you separate tasks, like the person who approves a payment isn't the same person who holds the assets or records the transaction you build in checks and balances.
It forces collusion, basically.
Exactly. Fraud becomes a team sport, which is harder to pull off and easier to detect. And that second question, has it been performed, is key. It's not enough to design the control on paper. You have to actually implement it and check periodically that it's still working as intended. It needs ongoing review.
Makes sense. It's a living control, not static. Now, building on documented expectations, questions 35, 36, and 37 cover codes of conduct for employees and third parties, plus getting acknowledgement of training.
Yeah, this widens the net. A code of conduct spells out what's acceptable and what's not. Extending it to third parties is smart, because vendors or partners can be involved in fraud schemes.
And the signed acknowledgement, just paperwork.
Not just paperwork. It creates a formal record that the employee understands the rules and commits to following them. It adds a layer of personal accountability.
Got it. Okay. This foundational section ends with some really interesting, maybe more nuanced questions. Question 42 on aligning authority and responsibility. Question 43 on disclosing related party transactions. And question 45. This one feels important. Are other employees informed about the risks related to management override of controls?
These are definitely more sophisticated controls. Misalignment between authority and responsibility, Q42, that creates dangerous gaps. Undisclosed related party deals, Q43. Classic conflict of interest territory, ripe for abuse.
But that last one, telling employees that managers can override controls. Why do that? Doesn't it undermine trust?
It might seem counterintuitive, but it's actually about empowerment and transparency. Look, management override is a known, significant fraud risk. Even the best controls can potentially be bypassed by someone high enough up.
Okay.
So, by informing employees about this risk, you're not saying, don't trust management, you're saying, be aware this can happen. It fosters vigilance. It makes it harder for a manager to override controls secretly for bad reasons because people know it's a possibility and might be more likely to notice or question something unusual. It actually strengthens the overall control environment by acknowledging a real-world vulnerability.
Wow, okay. That's a powerful concept. So taken together, these structural things really form the bedrock. They make it fundamentally harder for fraud to get started.
Exactly. You're building the fortress walls before the attack even comes.
Okay, so the fortress walls are up, the foundation is strong, but, determined fraudsters can still find ways through. So how do organizations actually catch fraud when it does happen, and how do they stop it from spreading?
Right. This is where detection and response come in, the watchtower segment, if you will.
I like that, the watchtower. So what's the first line of defense there?
Often it's the people themselves. Question 10 asks, does the organization provide an anonymous way to report suspected violations? A whistleblower hotline, essentially.
For employees.
Employees, yes, but also vendors, customers. Anyone. Providing a safe, confidential channel is crucial because tips are consistently the #1 way occupational fraud is detected. People see things, but they need a safe way to speak up without fear.
Makes perfect sense. But a tip is just the start. What happens next? Questions 11 and 12 seem relevant. Investigating promptly and keeping records.
Absolutely critical. You need swift and thorough investigation, Q11, for every credible report. The faster you act, the more likely you are to minimize losses. And maintaining a formal record, Q12, of all incidents, the investigations, the outcomes, that builds institutional knowledge. You learn from past events to prevent future ones.
So act fast, document everything. Seems logical.
And notice the blend here between prevention and detection. Question 13 asks about pre-employment background checks. That's purely preventative screen out risks before hiring.
Right.
Then question 14 asks about having a loss prevention function. These folks are often trained specifically to identify and mitigate risks, combining procedural controls with maybe even physical security. It's another proactive layer.
Okay, and then there's the internal audit function. Question 15 specifically mentions surprise audits. Does the surprise element really add that much value?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about keeping people on their toes, though it does do that.
So what's the main benefit?
Catching ongoing schemes. If people know auditors are coming on Tuesday, they can clean things up Monday night. Surprise audits, especially when focused on high-risk areas, catch processes as they actually operate. They uncover vulnerabilities that might otherwise be hidden.
And it sends a message too, presumably.
A very powerful one. It signals that fraud prevention is a serious, ongoing priority. It's a reality check for the effectiveness of your controls.
That makes a lot of sense. And kind of related, question 17 asks about periodically auditing compliance with internal controls. Is this different from the surprise fraud audits?
Slightly different focus, but similar effect. This is more about checking if people are following the established rules day to day. It reinforces the importance of those controls we talked about earlier. It's less about hunting for specific fraud, more about maintaining discipline and vigilance across the board. It constantly signals we care about these rules and we check.
So it creates a culture of compliance.
Exactly. It's that constant proactive reinforcement.
Okay, so between anonymous reporting, prompt investigations, background checks, loss prevention, and these different kinds of audits, it sounds like a pretty robust safety net.
That's the goal. Even if prevention fails, you want multiple ways to detect and respond quickly.
All right, we've talked structure, we've talked detection. Now let's shift gears a bit. This next part feels really different. It's about the human side of prevention.
Yeah, this is crucial. Understanding people, motivations, the company culture, it plays a massive role in fraud risk. This is the pulse check section.
Pulse check. I like that. So where does it start?
Well, right at the core of the employer-employee relationship. Question 18 asks, do employees feel they are treated and compensated fairly? And question 40 follows up. Does the organization have fair practices for bonuses, promotions, salary increases?
Why is fairness so important for fraud prevention?
Because perceived unfairness breeds resentment. And resentment can be a powerful motivator, or at least a rationalization for fraud. If someone feels cheated or undervalued, they might feel justified in getting what they deserve through illicit means. Management needs to actively gauge this surveys, exit interviews, open-door policies. Consistency is key.
So fair treatment reduces one of the potential legs of the fraud triangle rationalization.
Exactly. Then the assessment goes into specific individual red flags. These are behavioral things to watch for. Questions 19 through 25.
Okay, like what?
Well, classic ones. Large personal debts or credit problems, Q19. Spending far more than they are earning, Q20. That often points to lifestyle improvements funded by fraud.
Right, the sudden fancy car or expensive holidays.
Precisely. But also things like excessive gambling, Q21, alcohol or drug use, Q22. These indicate personal pressures or issues that can increase risk. And this is where employee assistance programs, EAPs, become important, offering confidential help.
So it's not just about spotting problems, but also offering solutions like EAPs.
Ideally, yes. The assessment also flags things like resentment towards superiors, Q23, close association with vendors or competitors, Q24, potential conflicts of interest there, or outside business interests, Q25. These all require monitoring and clear policies, like mandatory disclosure.
Are these really predictive, though? Or just signs someone's having a tough time?
That's a fair question. They aren't definitive proof of fraud, of course, but they often point to the pressure or opportunity elements. They signal potential vulnerabilities, stressors, or conflicts that responsible management needs to be aware of and manage appropriately. They're data points in the overall risk picture.
Okay, data points. Then the assessment looks broader at organizational health indicators, like high employee turnover, Q26. Why is that a flag?
High turnover, especially in sensitive areas like accounting or purchasing, can be a major warning sign. It might indicate poor management, low morale, or potentially it could be masking ongoing fraud. People leave before things are discovered, or new, untrained people are easier to manipulate.
Interesting. And question 27 about requiring annual vacations. We touched on this, but it seems so simple.
Simple, but incredibly effective. It's a fantastic detective control. When the person meticulously covering their tracks is forced to step away, even for a week or two,
Someone else steps in.
and anomalies surface. The scheme unravels because the perpetrator isn't there to constantly manage it. It's amazing how often mandatory vacations uncover fraud.
That's a great nugget right there. What about power dynamics? Question 28 asks if the company is dominated by a small group. And question 29 about unrealistic productivity measurements.
Both are significant risks. Domination by a small group means you need extra scrutiny on those individuals as they have concentrated power. Unrealistic targets, Q29. That creates immense pressure. It can push people to cut corners, falsify results, or commit fraud just to meet expectations. It creates a toxic results at all costs environment.
And on the flip side of pressure, questions 30 and 34 talk about lack of positive feedback or management not seeming to care about good behavior. How does poor morale link to fraud?
Directly. Low morale, feeling unappreciated. It breeds negativity and disengagement. An employee who feels valued and respected is far less likely to defraud their employer. Lack of recognition can fuel that same resentment we talked about earlier. It erodes loyalty.
Makes sense. And communication comes up too. Fear of delivering bad news, Q31, lack of communication generally, Q32, lack of clear responsibilities, Q33.
All huge issues. Fear, Q31, means problems get hidden until they explode. Poor communication, Q32, means employees don't feel safe raising concerns, potential red flags go unreported. Lack of clarity, Q33, causes confusion, frustration, and makes it easier for things, including fraud, to fall through the cracks. Open, clear communication is vital.
It really paints a picture where a healthy internal environment is just as critical as any technical control.
Absolutely. Which leads to the final pieces here, support and development.
Right. Like the EAPs we mentioned, Q38, Q39, providing counseling and making sure people know about it.
Yes, addressing those personal pressures proactively. And question 41, conducting exit interviews.
Why are those useful?
People are often more candid when they're leaving. They might reveal issues within a department, concerns about specific individuals, or control weaknesses that they wouldn't have mentioned while still employed. It's a valuable source of intel.
Good point. And then there's fostering a positive environment through things like clear performance goals, Q47, including ethics and reviews, Q48.
Exactly. Reasonable goals, Q47, provide direction without undue pressure. Explicitly valuing ethics in reviews and promotions, Q48, sends a clear message about what the company really values. It reinforces the right behaviors.
And finally, training, Q49, and job rotation, Q50.
Training, Q49, keeps skills sharp, makes employees feel invested in, and potentially reduces errors or the temptation to take shortcuts. Job rotation, Q50, where feasible, is brilliant. Like mandatory vacations, it brings fresh eyes to tasks, helping detect irregularities. Plus, it cross-trains staff, building resilience.
So it really comes full circle. Controls, detection, and this deep focus on culture, fairness, communication, and support.
That's the essence of it. If you connect this all to the bigger picture, the goal is creating an environment where fraud just finds it really, really hard to gain a foothold. It's about understanding that a healthy, ethical, supportive culture isn't fluff. It's a core component of robust fraud prevention.
Wow, that was incredibly thorough.
Mm-hmm.
It's so clear that effective fraud prevention isn't just one thing. It's this holistic system. You need the strong foundation, the active detection, and that constant pulse check on the human factors in the culture.
That's it, exactly. It's not just about rules on a page. It's about the interplay between structure, vigilance, and the actual environment people work in every day. Trust is part of it, too.
Yeah, definitely.
And the purpose of an assessment like this, it's not just about ticking boxes. It's really about understanding probabilities, seeing where the weaknesses might be before something bad happens.
Proactive resilience building.
Proactive resilience building, that's a great way to put it. You're trying to make the organization fundamentally resistant to fraud by addressing all these different layers. It's an ongoing effort, not a one-time fix.
So a final thought for you listening. What part of this whole puzzle stands out most to you? When you think about your own workplace or organizations you know, which elements feel strong and which might be potential weak spots?
Yeah, don't just think if these things exist, but how effectively are they actually working? How real is that tone at the top? How robust is the detection? How healthy is the culture, really?
Because these ideas, they go beyond just stopping financial fraud, don't they? They really speak to the overall health, integrity, and resilience of any organization, something to definitely mull over.